And I mentioned this, I mentioned a few minutes ago that we would get to this, the whole idea of tensions to manage versus problems to solve. And so this is one of the most insightful principles that you kind of camp out on for a couple of chapters in your book. About this, you write, too many times leadership sees every issue as a problem. Problems demand solutions, and good leaders solve problems. But if an issue is less problem and more tension, providing a solution does do more damage than we may realize. Tensions are powerful. They help keep our organization and leadership in balance. If we solve a tension, we lose the power of the stretch and pull. Now, and one of the reasons I'm so excited to talk about this subject with you today is that I've been talking about this with the organizational leaders behind the scenes for quite some time. And the first time I heard about managing tensions and what it has to do with leadership, effective leadership, was I was reading a book about 10 years ago or so called Relaunch, and it's by a guy by the name of Dr. Mark Rutland. And his book Relaunch is about organizational turnarounds. And in it, he talks about how a lot of people, when they show up and they say, "Hey, we're going to turn this around," or even if they're building something from scratch, they say, "Okay, let's build something. Here's how we're going to build it." He said, effective leadership is less about building something, and it's more about managing tensions. And the principle that he uses in his book is that within every organization, no matter what, if it's a business or nonprofit, whatever, you have two forces. One is control and the other is chaos. Leaders, producers, they tend to provide the chaos in an organization, and you have your accountants, lawyers, et cetera, that provide the
It's leadership and
control.
management, Will, is what we talked about earlier.
Yes.
Those two things.
Yes.
It's just,
Uh,
yeah, I mean, leaders create chaos and managers create order.
what do you think are some good organizational examples of tensions to manage? As and by
Yeah.
the way, you've mentioned like 2 dozen in your book, so if you just want to pick one of those,
Yeah.
one or two of
Well,
those,
I'll
that'd be
pick
great.
my favorite one was when I was talking to Cheryl Batchelder with Popeyes. She talked about when she arrived at Popeyes. I mean, it was quite a mess, and so there was a lot of cleaning up to do. The first thing she did, and I write extensively about this, but she went on a listening tour. And so she spent several weeks, months really, going and listening, but not just to the people who worked directly for her. She is going on the road into stores, sitting with customers, listening to their experience, listening to the frontline cashier worker, listening to the day manager, listening to the franchise owner, and listening to the corporate entities as well. And so what she found is that, and this is true of every franchise or multi-site church or whatever it may be, it's the same story, but the central team, so in her case, Popeye's corporate, wanted more control. They wanted to control the way everything happens at the local store. Well, I'll give you one guess as to how all the local store owners and operators wanted to behave. There was too much control. They wanted more autonomy, right? Well, that's a tension to manage. If you solve the problem, you have to pick one of the two. And by solving the problem, picking one of the two, you lose the power of the dynamic that's making it greater by keeping it there. So, in the Popeye situation, if you gave the local stores complete autonomy to run everything the way they want, imagine how many Popeyes logos we would see just driving down the street. Imagine how many different kinds of cooking of sandwiches we would have. How many, I mean, again, hopefully we wouldn't get this far, but cooking times and temperatures. We don't want a lot of deviation on that, right? So, but giving that much autonomy would solve the problem. Everybody would stop complaining in the field, yet it wouldn't lead to the better solution. The opposite is true too, though. If you removed all agency from the local store owner, they couldn't contextualize anything in their local marketing for their local communities. They wouldn't be able to experiment possibly with different kinds of products, limited on some level, but still there's experimentation that happens. I mean, some of my favorite Chick-fil-A sauces came out of local stores testing and playing around with different sauces. The Chick-fil-A sauce is one of these. It wasn't created at corporate. It was created in the field by a local store because they had autonomy to experiment a little bit, but not completely. So that's a tension that has to be managed. In multi-site churches, it's the same thing. Every campus pastor wants full autonomy to do their own thing. Every central team wants the campus pastor just to run the playbook and stop asking questions. Neither one of those is the right choice in totality. Keeping the tension between them is so helpful.
Our entire culture has moved away from that. It's not a culture of honor and loyalty anymore. And again, we could pontificate why and if it's good or not, but the reality is it's true. And so If you can make more money by changing jobs, people will. If you can get a promotion, if you can, the whole thing is going to end. It just continues to drive forward that way because it creates more opportunity for the individual.